In the bustling town of Kumasi, Owusu was a man whose voice carried weight. He sat at the front of gatherings, his words sharp like a blade. He had built his reputation as a man of wisdom, but his wisdom was often cruel. A woman who has a child without a husband is like a tree without roots, useless, he would say, shaking his head in mock disappointment. Whenever he passed single mothers struggling to carry their babies while selling on the streets, he scoffed. Foolish girls who could not control themselves. Now look at them, raising bastards. Some of these women he made mockery of were victims of failed marriage promises. Other women was as a result of assault, but he cared no less. He never hesitated to mock them, making sure everyone knew that such women were a disgrace. Owusu had a daughter, Afia. She was his pride, beautiful, obedient, and well-educated. He boasted about how well he had raised her, how she was nothing like the loose women he condemned. My daughter will never be a disgrace to me, he often said. But fate does not listen to prideful men. One evening, Afia came home, her face pale, her eyes filled with fear. Owusu barely noticed at first. He was too busy complaining about a young woman from the neighborhood who had recently given birth out of wedlock. Now her father works with his head down, ashamed. If that were my daughter, I would throw her out, he declared. Afia flinched at his words, but she said nothing. Later that night, after her mother had gone to sleep, she found the courage to speak. Papa, I need to tell you something. Owusu barely looked up from his evening drink. Speak. Her hands trembled. I'm pregnant. The words struck him like thunder. The cup slipped from his hand, shattering on the floor. Silence filled the room, thick and suffocating. Afia's heart pounded. Owusu stood up slowly, his face dark with rage. What did you say? Afia's voice wavered. I didn't plan for this, Papa. It's just, shut your mouth, he roared. His voice echoed through the house. You have disgraced me. After all I have taught you, you, my daughter, have joined the very women I have warned against. Tears streamed down Afia's face, but Owusu did not care. He saw only his own shame. What would people say? How could he, the man who had insulted so many, now face the town? That night, he did not comfort his daughter. He did not ask her how she felt. He did not think about the life growing inside her. He only thought of himself. The next morning, he called her aside. His voice was low but firm. We will fix this, quietly. No one will know. Afia knew what he meant. That evening, when darkness covered the town, Owusu led Afia through the narrow streets, taking back roads to avoid familiar faces. He knew of a midwife on the outskirts of town, one who handled problems like this. His heart pounded as they approached the small mud hut. He knocked cautiously. A woman opened the door, her sharp eyes taking in the sight of them. She knew why they were there. Without a word, she stepped aside, allowing them in. But fate had other plans. A neighbor had seen them sneaking through the streets. By morning, whispers spread like wildfire. Did you hear? Owusu, the man who causes single mothers, was seen taking his daughter to the midwife. He wanted to hide his shame. The very people who once nodded at his words now laughed at him. By noon, the entire town knew. And Owusu, the man who had never bowed his head before, now could not lift it. Women he had insulted for years stood tall, watching him with knowing eyes. Some pitied him, but most did not. Where is your laughter now, Owusu? One woman asked as she passed him in the market. You mocked us, yet now you walk the same road. Owusu could not respond. His own words had come back to haunt him. At home, Afia sat quietly, her hands resting on her belly. She had not spoken much since the night before. She had heard the rumors, but she did not feel shame, only sadness. Her father, the man she had once admired, had been willing to erase her child to protect his pride. She had expected disappointment. She had expected anger, but she had not expected betrayal. Later that evening, Owusu sat alone, staring at the floor. His wife, who had been silent through the ordeal, finally spoke. You judged others as if you were above them. Now you know their pain. Owusu closed his eyes. He had spent years ridiculing single mothers, yet when faced with his own daughter's pregnancy, he had tried to do worse than those he condemned. That night, he made a decision. The next morning, he went to Afia and, for the first time since she told him the news, he spoke gently. I was wrong, he said, his voice low. I let my pride blind me. If you will let me, I will stand by you. Afia looked at him for a long time before nodding. In the months that followed, Owusu changed. He listened instead of judging. He supported instead of mocking. He still carried shame, but he carried it with the understanding that no one is above life's lessons. And when Afia gave birth to a beautiful baby boy, Owusu held his grandson in his arms and whispered, I will never judge so harshly again.